One of the more common comments I've heard is that Mega Man X8 is only considered good because of how terrible Mega Man X7 is, right? You've heard that argument before, I'm sure. Oh, you only like such and such because it's not as bad as the previous thing. I'm sure you've heard that in terms of shows, in terms of movies, books, games, music, theater. So, well, I'm going to go ahead and say that no, while this game is obviously a rather substantial step up from Mega Man X7, it still can stand on its own in several ways, with a couple of noteworthy exceptions. And I want to start there. Because I wanted to really love this game. I wanted to absolutely embrace it. And it's still reviewed pretty darned well overall. But the problem is, there are these stages, 3 of them, actually, and thanks to a combination of issues, one of which plagues the entire game. Actually, I guess there's 4 stages, aren't there? 4 stages, and thanks to a combination of issues and the stages themselves, replaying this game is something I'm probably never going to do. I've got something stuck in my eye. Didn't you hate that? It's like, all right, I've gotten all ready, I've done my stretches, okay, I've gotten in my uniform, I'm all good to go, and there's just something stuck in my eye. Oh my god. Hey, wait, hang on, I think I've got it. There we go. Yep, it was a terrible chaser bike stage. The frost stage, for the frickin' Yeti is, not good, is the nicest way I can put that. And then there's the volcano stage, and then there's the lightning stage, where you're going through the city. Let's do this in reverse order. So you're going through the lightning city stage, and you have to smash your way forward in order to get to this guy, in order to shoot him, in order to progress to the stage. You get 2 loops of the stage in order to be able to accomplish it, and that's it. That's the whole stage. Already problematic. But there's a lot of little things and a lot of big things that make this whole thing absolutely suck. The first thing is, this is audio spam central. Now, games in this era already kind of had an issue with audio spam, and Lord knows audio spam was kind of a Mega Man problem at this point in time, but this is just insane how much this constantly. It's also very visually busy, and in some cases it's kind of hard to see where the damaging zones are for certain aspects of the stage. So that all sucks. Okay, cool. Moving on. That's kind of the more the normal stuff. Then we have issues like, there's these little power-ups you have to get. They refill your dash bar. You have to dash to hit the boss. If you hit anything, the boss attacks or the actual terrain, you get slowed down. Remember, you have to keep up to him and be mashing the attack button on him for a period of time in order to be able to defeat him prior to finishing the 2 loops, okay? So you have to avoid stuff while getting the power-ups, while zooming up to him, while hitting him. Now, none of that is by itself bad. However, you have no real ability to aim. All you can do is aim in front of you. It's kind of Star Foxy in that you could just move around in the corner, but the problem is Star Fox is a well-designed game. This is not. You have no tools in your arsenal to improve the gameplay experience. All you have is getting those power-ups, dashing, and shooting directly in front of you. The general strategy is to just get right up on him and then just mash the button as hard as you can, right? That's how you do it. And hope you don't run into anything or his attacks, which you can't dodge when you're right behind him, and then get knocked back and then have to rush back up. So we've already got the first problem. There's no tools in your arsenal to make a Star Fox game sequence work. Problem number 1. Or like 3 at this point. Problem number 2, or 4, is that the power-ups that you get are not logically placed. This is kind of a weird one, but this is important for something like this. So you just move around on the screen, but that has nothing to do with where you're turning. However, you are not only going to be naturally inclined as a normal human being to be steering in the direction the camera's turning, because that's just how we function, but also the fact that that's where the boss is going. So you're going this way. Here, I'll kind of do it like this. You're going this way, the boss is going this way, the boss kind of goes around the corner. You're naturally going to be tilting over here because you're trying to hit the boss, or because you think you're turning left, and then you eventually turn left. The power-up is over here on the right. And this is a consistent problem. The power-up placement is completely illogical, or just had no design put into it. And again, I've talked before about the concept of some stuff that is designed and stuff that's just placed. And this is not designed. Problem number 5 at this point is the fact that you take up such a large chunk of the screen that you actually kind of block what's in front of you. This is problematic, especially on a stage with this much visual chaos. And it boils down to, unless you're doing this constantly to be able to peek behind yourself, which limits your maneuverability and your ability to dodge things and your ability to hit him, you have to have it a bit memorized where the different power-ups are in order to be able to catch them, because you're blocking so much of your visibility, you can't see them coming. That's actually how I defeated it the second time when I did my New Game Plus run-through, where I knew where all the power-ups were because I memorized them from the last time. None of this is good design, and all of this is irritating. I wanted to start with this particular stage because I think this is the stage that's the least salvageable. The other two stages I have problems with could be fixed with a few changes, but this is just, what the hell were they thinking? I heard someone who shall remain completely anonymous make the comment during Mega Man X7 that Mega Man X8 was a little bit too gimmicky. Allow me to disagree with that sentence, sort of. Now, this is getting into the weeds about specifics of nomenclature rather than the intent, because I do get the overall intent, and the intent is very simple. The gimmicks aren't good. The stages with gimmicks that I like are fun. You know, the stealth stage of the pitch dark area, that's cool, I like that. Or the gravity stage where you have to constantly be switching the gravity around, that's cool, I like that. Going through and fighting the what do they call it, the training session where you have to fight these things and that changes the path you go. That's cool. I like that. But then we have the gimmicks like these ones. And I suppose this is just inevitable when you try stuff. You know, you're going to fail sometimes, right? That's the price that we always pay as gamers and as developers when it comes to trying things out in game development. So let's move on to the next stage, which is the Volcano stage. Now, the Volcano stage, this would be pretty tricky to fix, but I think it's fixable. What's the issue with this stage? Oh, this is very simple. So you got these platforms, right? And they're just kind of slowly rising up, or actually more accurately, you're slowly going down, and you have to hop down from platform to platform to platform as the screen continues to auto-scroll down. So it's an auto-scroller, first problem. The second problem is when you get shoved to the top of the screen, you just take damage and plummet from wherever you are, which you don't see because it's actually above the screen quite a bit. So good luck figuring that out. Problem number 17 is the fact that when you fall down to the ground, you die instantly. Now, this is already kind of silly, but that's how autoscrollers work. So we're willing to accept that. But it is by far the biggest problem of this stage, is the fact that it's an instant kill when you plummet. I'm going to take a sidebar to admit something. One of the things I don't like about the stages in this game in general is they really seem to be in love with instant kills. There's so many sections of so many stages where it's like, okay, and here's some instant-kill spikes. And here's giant death pits. And here's spikes on top of death pits. There's this one stage where you have to jump up and then jump down onto... So there's two pillars like this, and there's a space in between them. And the space is covered in spikes. So there's a narrow area you go, so you have to jump down onto here, jump up, and then dash across over here, and then jump over here to here. And, what is this, Mega Man Zero? They really love their instant kill deaths. So you're going through this Volcano stage, instant kill dying, and okay, fine, that's whatever. Then there's the fact that there's nothing that really makes this engaging or interesting. I mean, I could point out that they have this specific type of crate which leaves an explosion, and this explosion does a stun attack to you, which puts you into status. You know, it's the Ninja Gaiden thing, right? You get knocked and you cannot interact or react with the game for a few seconds, which makes you plummet to your death. So that sucks. But then there's the fact that it's this nice, slow auto-scroller. And you just do this nice, slow auto-scroller for several minutes until you finally get to the bottom. And then it's like, okay, fine. Then we actually have a checkpoint and we can move on. And that's the first thing I want to point out is the lack, or I guess it's actually the 20th thing I point out at this point, lack of checkpoints. This is a problem in every stage, but it's most egregious in this stage and the next one I'm going to be talking about. The lack of checkpointing makes it... The whole reason I'm so big on mid-mission checkpointing is because there was this era of gaming, which this game happens to sit in, where they just kind of wanted you to do effectively the whole stage over again. And that's not necessarily bad by itself, but when you combine it with other aspects of level design, like, instant kill death spikes or death traps right at the end of a checkpoint section, that can get very irritating. How many of you ever played Guild Wars 1? I know that's a weird segue, but I swear it's relevant. In fact, it's the first game I was reminded of when I thought of this, because I like Guild Wars 1. It's a great game. But it has a huge flaw to it, in that there's no mid-mission checkpointing for their missions. The missions can last over an hour. So imagine going through an hour of a mission and getting to the very last battle of this mission and dying. And guess what? You get to do the whole thing over again. That is why I'm so big on mid-mission checkpointing. It's also one of the reasons why I tend to be in favor of the very concept of quick saving. Because while quick saving can absolutely be abused in order to make a game substantially easier, it also pretty much completely negates this problem in a nutshell. And quick saving is on you, the player. You decide whether or not you're going to quick save or not. So it's a very easy way to allow for basically infinite checkpointing on the player's side, and they can decide what level of checkpointing they want to do. But I'm getting off topic. I was reminded of that excessively while playing through this game. Because I'm not sure how you fix the volcano level. Like, how do you fix that core concept? Okay, you're slowly auto-scrolling down across platforms into instant death pits. I don't know how to fix that. Getting rid of the auto-scroller maybe, but that just turns it into a boring vertical section, which would still be better. Checkpointing in the middle of a auto-scroller is actually kind of hard to do, depending on how they've coded. I don't actually know. Maybe they can do that. I mean, there are Mario games that can checkpoint in the middle of auto-scrollers, so maybe they can do that here. But I haven't mentioned the worst part of that auto-scroller yet, and that's the fact that occasionally you have to do blind jumps. In fact, I think it's a total of twice, which doesn't sound that bad, but both times are towards the end of a lengthy checkpoint section. Hey, sounds familiar, right? So you've got this point. And I remember that specifically, there's a platform on the left, and you're going up, and there is no other platform. Remember, if you fall off and die, you die. You have to start all the way back over here. So I'm like, and I just jump blindly, because there's only 3 places the platform's going to be. And I just guess. I had a 1 1/3 chance of succeeding, and I failed, and I died. It was actually left. I had to jump to the left. Blind jumps into instant death pits. And by the way, there's several of those throughout this entire game. Once again, Mega Man 0. So, okay, fine, whatever. We got through that stage. Let's talk about the ice stage, the chaser bike stage. This is the one that's hit by the checkpoint problem the most. Because it's just a long, slow, boring Galaga game. And you're just going through... It is. You're just... And then the enemies come down in a formation, and you shoot them, and they come down in another formation and shoot them. And then you fight a boss, which takes too many hits to kill, and they do another section like that. And I'm being so dismissive. You don't understand if you haven't played it, if you haven't seen it. This is several minutes. This is the longest stage in the game by a huge margin. And the best part is, all the power-ups and all things are right at the end. And if you didn't bring the right person, or the right person is dead, sucks to be you. You gotta do the whole stage over again. I actually missed out on one of the chips because Axel had died by the time I got there, and I just did not want to do that again because I hate that stage so much. It's so egregiously aggravating. And then, hang on, towards the end of the second of these stretches, because there's only the one checkpoint, guess what there is? Instant death pits. And the best part is several of them are blind. And it's extremely easy to either physics your way into collision, or to simply fall into the pits and not see them coming, because you literally can't see them coming in some cases. All of this sounds like a lot of negativity, and that's because it is. I really wanted to start with that, and those 3 stages. There's actually a 4th stage. I'm going to go and tell you about it right now, because it's the last stage. I have beaten the last stage without cheats back on the collection. It's actually... hang on, I got it right here. Yeah, this thing. The Mega Man X collection. I actually... Maybe I haven't actually beaten it on this version. I know I've beaten this game. Actually, I think it was a rental, now that I'm thinking about it. It was a rental. This only goes up to X6. That's funny. Do I not have... I don't think I have a physical copy of X8, now that I'm looking at it. Well, whatever. Me and my friends, we played this back in the day on rental. And we did beat it. I say we because it's kind of a group effort. Have gotten through that last stage without cheating. That's the only thing that's relevant about that. I didn't manage that this time. Because it's a stage that's filled with enemies that are just wasting your time. And it's filled with instant death spikes. And that's it. That's the stage in a nutshell. Oh, by the way, every time you game over on the final boss gauntlet, which is 3 bosses in a row, all of which are pretty mean... That's not true. The first boss is pretty easy. The second and third bosses are pretty mean and or terrible. Then you have to do that whole thing over again. Oh yeah, no checkpoints. in that section. That's not quite fair. There's like the first section of the moon, which is pathetic, and then you get to the spike section, and there's no checkpoints on the spike section. There's just do the whole spike section perfectly. Oh, you died. Sucks to be you. One of the jumps involves going up on a small ledge, and then to another small ledge, over to the other side of the ledge, then up here. Then we have to do a ledge, get to the very top of that, and do a double jump in order to be able to get across and move forward. Just spikes everywhere while you're doing that. Any screw up, start over again. Now, in the interest of fairness, you're probably thinking, Lord, this doesn't sound too terrible. After all, there are other X games and other Zero games that had these kind of spike problems that you haven't really had issues with. And you're right. And the reason why is because those other games allowed me to Dark Souls my way to victory. Allow me to explain. If you die in Dark Souls, I mean, you lose your souls, and that sucks, but that's it. If you already have no souls, which, an experienced player will do when they're going into a difficult section, then you didn't really lose anything other than your time. Now, that sucks, but you just do it over again. And if you fail, you do it over again, and if you fail, you do it over again. Through repetition, we learn, right? We try to get better at the experience and learn how to do the jumps and learn how to do the process. This game has the Retry Chip thing. And the Retry Chip thing, I wasn't sure what I thought of it at first. I knew I would have to talk about it going into it. But the problem with the Retry Chip thing is that it's dumb and terrible because it removes that pattern of trying to reattempt things and try to improve yourself at the game. Here's how this works. So it's effectively lives, right? You have 2 lives. When you lose the lives, you game over. That's not really different. But if you've been paying attention to the previous X games and the Z games, when you game over, what you do is you hit the continue button or the stage select button or quit. So if you hit stage select, you obviously go back to the stage and you revert all your progress, but you can go and get other power-ups or get other items or refill your E-tanks or whatever you need to do to reset and then go try the stage again. That's fine. If you continue, you restart at the checkpoint you were just at. In X8, you have the retry chips. Those are your lives. Once you run out of those, you go back to the stage select. No choice to continue. And this seems like such a small thing, but this adds so much aggravation to this game, it's kinda silly. Oh, but you can buy new retry chips, you say. Yes, you can buy 3, which means you can have a total of 5 lives going into any stage. That's it. 5 attempts to do the thing perfectly, with the other problems already mentioned with instant kills and low checkpointing. And you start to see the problem. All of these problems coincide with each other. I've talked about this concept before, where it's not like the retry chip itself is terrible, or the spikes themselves are terrible. It's a combination of all of these issues just makes this aggravating to replay. The level design in this game kinda sucks. I don't think I gave more than 2 positives for levels in this game, which is really sad. But all of that is the majority of the negativity I have to share about this game. The rest is actually quite positive. So this is, everybody knows, this is done by Capcom's Production Studio 1, aka what would eventually become Platinum Games. Yes, that Platinum Games. It makes sense though, because this game, X8, plays a lot more like a beat-em-up, a side-scroller beat-em-up, say, well, I shouldn't do that. It's similar to Bayonetta or in many ways like Nier Automata, rather than a traditional Mega Man game. Now that's fine, the format works and I have no issue with that. The boss design is awesome, which of course it is because it's freaking Platinum Games. Pretty much every boss in the game was at the very least fun. That's not quite true. Almost every boss, we came so close. Almost every boss in the entire game is at least fun, and several of them are really engaging, and there's some awesome, cool, legit, interesting fights. Most of the bosses have a huge variety of attacks. They skip the random problem, and they have different ways they could react to you. It's just some generally cool, excellently designed stuff. I hate to just breeze over what is easily one of the better part of the game, but the fact is that every boss fight was something that was engaging. Except for the last few fights. The second to last fight, which I'm saying without names because we're still in spoiler territory. The second to last fight is pretty much how you don't do a boss fight. Huge swaths of invulnerability periods combined with an enemy that just kind of randomly does stuff. And hits like a truck, of course. Now, by the time I was refighting that boss fight, I think for the 3rd or 4th time, I'd already gotten most of the patterns down, so I was just like, okay, whatever. Come on, let's go. But then we get to the actual last boss fight. This is such a shame. I already spoke positively about the final boss of Mega Man ZX2, which was a very similar concept to this boss. But this boss just just falls flat. The actual attacks are cool. I love the attack patterns. There's this thing where there's like a circle of damaging feathers that slowly expands. This is a platinum game, so of course there's religious symbolism all over the place. You literally fight a devil and then an angel whose name is similar to Lucifer, who's trying to convince people to build a tower into the heavens to destroy the old world. I mean, come on. Anyways, symbolism. There's so much symbolism in this game. It's actually funny. But yeah, so slowly circling thing, but there's gaps in it and you have to kind of go through those. And then another circle comes in and you've got like the small circle going out and the large circle coming in and you have to dodge both at the same time. It was cool. I like it. I like the attacks. That's not the problem. There's two problems with the last boss, and there are only two, but they combine very brutally. First of all is, of course, large sections of invulnerability, because of course there are. But the second is the boss HP gap. Now, I forget what this is properly called. Actually, hang on. I'm going to pull up my website right now. Pull up my review of Pokemon Shield, because I refer to it there. There it is. Because this is something that absolutely drives me bonkers when games. Final Fantasy VII R1 did this exact same problem, too. HP barriers, that's what we call that. So, the final boss has HP barriers. Now, if you've never experienced this, the way this works is, here's their HP bar. Now, let's say you hit them for all of their health, somehow. Well, they have an HP barrier at the 75% mark. So their HP goes down to 75% and just sits there. And they're invincible until they do whatever it is they need to do until they enter phase 2. And then you can hit them again for all of their health to put them down to 25%. I'm just making up numbers, but you get the idea. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad concept. There are ways that this idea can be done well. This is not one of them, because it's actually worse than the usual. It's not just the fact that he's got to have the phase changes, which he does. It's also the fact that he has to finish his current attack while he's stuck here. So let's say we hit him down to the 75% marker, and he's in the middle of doing that feather attack I just mentioned. Well, he has to finish the whole attack, and it takes like a solid minute before he's finally back into being, damageable after having done his phase transition. That's a solid minute of total invulnerability because he's at an HP barrier. That's one problem. The other problem is the fact that when you get to the final part of the final boss, there's actually a DPS check. And you have very little viability to make this without failure. In fact, the very first time I fought this guy, I thought I was going to one-shot him, and I was really excited about it. I had all the cheats off, everything off. I was going to one-shot him, and I missed one of my attacks. Literally one. Because what you have to do is you have to hit him with a type of attack that breaks his barrier, which is something we've been exposited towards since the very beginning. Axel just shoots for a bit. Zero, it's his third lightsaber swing, and X needs to do a 3-charge attack. And I did a 2-charge attack, one of those shots. And because I missed that one shot, he instantly kills you, and I died. And then you go all the way back to do it all over again from the second to last boss, because checkpointing. And you start to see the problems here. I swore I was going to start talking positively about this game. Let's talk positively about this game. So I mentioned this is Platinum Games, or at least who would eventually become Platinum Games. The game actually controls like a Mega Man game. It is tight and responsive. The controls are legit. The platforming is, for the most part, pretty good. There are a few issues I have here and there with it, but that's okay. The enemy design is much, much improved from the previous one. The enemy variety is much improved. The overall layout of how you do the interface and what kind of moves you get, all that stuff's really improved. They did this really cool thing with the armor. So you have neutral armor, and okay, it's whatever. But the way it works is you've got 4 red pieces and 4 blue pieces. And each one of them does something separate. And it actually tells you fully in the game, in the menu, what each one does. Which, by the way, is the first time they've done that in a Mega Man X game. Oh, don't mistake me. In previous things, Dr. Light would say, this is what this does. He's done that all the way back to X1. But this is the first time that you can go back, if you happen to have forgotten, and say, oh, what does the blue headpiece do? Oh, it does that. It actually tells you. There's actually a lot of that in this game. It'll tell you what the chips do. It tells you what the pieces do. It tells you what the weapons do. Some good stuff. So you can just mix and match however you want with those pieces. Now, if you have all blue, then your Giga attack changes, and if you have all red, your Giga attack changes. But there's no real significant set bonus of note here. Instead, the whole point is mix and match your armor parts, and that's awesome. I cannot believe it took us until X8 to get the idea of mix and matching armor parts. So that's really cool, and that's how X plays. Oh, actually, X gets kind of boring weapons, if I'm being honest. But that's okay, because his default playstyle is actually legit. So he has a giant buster shot. He is intended to charge. I've already said this before, but X is artillery. And he just has this giant shot, which hits a huge chunk of the thing and does a lot of damage. Now, of course, the catch is he's got to slowly build it up, and then he's got to shoot it. And depending on how you do the parts, how he moves is different. But I want you to keep that in mind, because that playstyle is very different from Axel. This is one of the biggest problems X7 made. I don't know if I mentioned this in the X7 Rumination, but in X7, Axel and X played identically. There was no functional difference between the two. They both shot and aimed the same. And even though X could charge and Axel couldn't, there wasn't really a lot of variance between the style between the two. In here, it is completely different. So X, for example, can get the super jump up, or he can get the, I can't remember the other thing, actually. Oh, yeah, he can get the invincibility dash. That's the other thing. In this, Axel gets the hover. He just gets to hover. Now, he had the hover in the last game, too, but he gets to hover and move quite a bit while doing it, and shoot while hovering. And you just hold down the button now. It's an auto shot. It's a straight up machine gun. So that's already cool. But this is when we get into the very cool stuff, because in addition to that, he actually has legitimately different weapons for each boss you kill. Now I know X kind of has that, but as I just kind of hinted at, all the weapons for X kind of suck. The weapons for Axel are kind of awesome. There's a legitimate variety there, and each one of them either shoots differently or does different things, and that's cool. So Axel, this is kind of funny. Axel not only plays differently because he's the machine gunner, but he's kind of easy mode. Because of his hover, and because of the fact that he can shoot in all directions, by the way, it's another thing he can do, he kind of plays is the easiest of the three. I want you to remember that for later. I'm going to hope I remember. I'm going to make a note right now. I don't want to forget. Of course, I don't have a pen when I say that. But anybody who's played some of the later Mega Man Classic games, Axel plays a lot like Bass, or Bass if you prefer. So he's kind of easy mode. Well, how's Zero play? Much better than the previous game. I guess that's not saying much. Zero is kind of the same as he's always been in terms of overall play style, but that's still good. He still has all of his different attacks. He still has the fact that he gains new actual moves, like the spinning uppercut or the slashing down, or he's got the slice forward, which then hits everything behind him. He still gets moves in addition to things, so that's still good. But they went another mile. They went another step with Zero. Now, I'm not 100% willing to give the game credit on this, because a lot of this stuff is very hidden or very expensive. But if you go and get all the... There's, I think, 4 weapons. I think there's actually 5 for Zero. And when I say weapons, I mean literally weapons. So you got a Z-Saber. I got the Sigma Blade, because of course I did. But you can also get the fans. You can get a hammer, I believe. And I know you can get a fist weapon as well. And each of these attack differently. And each of his moves attack differently depending on which thing you have equipped. And each of them have their own little sub-properties, like the fan is a very defensive weapon, whereas the pike is the other one. The glaive is just a super reach. You can just hit from across the screen kind of a thing. That's really cool. And if you're paying attention, this is one of the things the game does best. Good boss design with 3 playable characters, each of which who is very distinct in playstyle from each other. If it wasn't for that freaking level problem, that by itself would make this game extremely replayable. But wait, there's more. This game has New Game Plus. And unlike X7, which didn't even get a positive for its New Game Plus, this New Game Plus is actually legit. You carry forward everything except for the boss weapons. Everything. Everything else goes right. Who you've got unlocked with what, armor pieces, weapons for Zero, chips you've developed, metal, and progress. It keeps track of like which bosses you've killed with the double attack and stuff like that. It just keeps track of all that stuff, and that's awesome. Again, if it wasn't for those 4 freaking stages, I would probably be inclined to replay this game even more. I was thinking about doing a 3rd playthrough on camera, but those stages kind of ground me out of that. You see why I wanted to start with that, right? Because I have nothing but positive things to say about this game other than those damn stages. And it's not like you can just cheat to get through. I mean, you can cheat to get through one of them, which is the ice stage. You can just turn on the cheats, and then it's just a slow, boring slog. You can't cheat through the volcano. You still just instantly die, and you can't cheat through the lightning stage. You still have to all the problems are still there. So there's no bypassing those 2 problems. So it's not like, say, X6, where I could say, play it with cheats on. I mentioned the narrative very briefly there. I want to talk about Doom Eternal very quickly, Doom 5. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything, don't worry. But if you've never played Doom 5, the plot of Doom 5 is not great. And the story there is not great. But, and since I have my website up here, I'll just do this. Doom Eternal got a net plus 10 to story. Now, several people were very confused by this, and I got a lot of people going, huh? But this is one of the natures of the system we use, because the story was not very good, but it was very well told. The presentation, I'm just going to read my list. The presentation, the attention to detail, the brick design, the world building, the continuity usage, the enjoyable characters, the music direction, the storyboarding, the visual continuity, and the voice acting. All of that made for a very enjoyably told story, even though the story itself wasn't good. That, of course, immediately ties into Mega Man X8. Mega Man X8's plot is dumb, to say that as bluntly as I can. But it's not any more dumb than, say, X4's plot or X7's plot. But the thing is, X8 bypasses all of those story negatives we've been giving the X series pretty much since 4. The voice acting is actually good, with actual voice acting and actual voice directors who know what they're doing. The storyboarding for cutscenes is actually thought out, and they put real effort into trying to make it show properly, and so forth and so on. All those little things that usually go into exactly how a story is told either weren't a negative or were a positive in this game. So, even though it's not a great story, it's reasonably well told, and there is some cool stuff here as well. I do happen to like the fact that X slowly descends into being a Knight Templar in this game, which is certainly kind of a nice tie into the Zero series. But more to the point, the biggest problem I have with the story, we're officially in spoilers, by the way, is that it comes up with 3 major ideas and does nothing with all of them. So I already mentioned the symbolism. There's actually 2 bits of symbolism in this game. The first is the obvious. It's heaven, devil, blah, 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 and the usual, right? It doesn't do anything with that, and it doesn't earn it. It's just the final boss, who's Luminate, by the way, since we're in spoilers. The final boss is just an angel, and Sigma's the devil, and it's just, okay, sure, whatever, right? There's nothing of significance done with that, other than the fact that the final boss fight happens in an angelic choir area for some reason. With an angelic creature who's dropping feathers to attack you with. Sure, whatever. Also, the fact that X8 is literally subtitled Paradise Lost, just in case you missed that. And Jacob's Ladder. You start the game out in Noah Park. I mean, it's really, really over it. It's like someone grabbed a giant mallet and emblazoned like symbolism on the face of the mallet, so they just smash you in the face with it over and over. It's a little bit much. So that's whatever. They don't do anything with it, so that doesn't mean anything. Moving on. Let's move on to the second bit of symbolism. They do a bit more with this one. This is the new destroying the old. The problem is, again, they don't really do much with this concept, but they do at least bring up the idea of the new world and how the old world are in conflict with each other. At every step of the way, X and Zero specifically are shown to be part of the old way of doing things, and all of the enemies they're fighting are part of the new way of doing things. Sigma himself mentions that this is essentially his primary motivation. Lumine flat out says that we have to remove the old world for some reason. And that's part of the problem. I mentioned that for some reason. It's never exposited as to why the new has to destroy the old. The new versus the old is a constant theme in a lot of works, and can work for many reasons, but the new destroying the old needs some explanation for why it's happening. The concept of the new destroying the old is something that it's harder to make it work in terms of a narrative theme. And here, no explanation is ever given for why they're so desperate to destroy the old. They have access to space, and they want to leave and go start their own Reploid society, which sounds a lot like the plot of X4, actually. Okay, go do it. You have the power and knowledge and access, and you control the elevator, and you're in charge of this whole thing. Go do it. The third theme, is something that also ties into X4, and that's the usage of the word Maverick. Now, this is something they briefly concepted in X4, which I loved the concept of. I've said the word concept twice in a row because I'm really tired. I apologize. They wanted... I've said before, there's the Maverick virus, and then there's people who go Maverick, and then there's people who are labeled Maverick. And each of these is a step removed from this. The people who have the Maverick virus, yeah, they're deadly, violent. It's effectively, in terms of narrative construct, it is the zombie virus, right? They are no longer themselves, and you are putting someone down for their own good. They're not evil. They are a victim, right? Cool, that works. Then you've got people who go Maverick. This is just criminals. This is just, it's real life. These people have sentience and sapience, so they just have the ability to go and decide, I'm just going to go murder a bunch of people, or I'm going to rob this place, or whatever. That's okay, that's horrible. And dealing with those people and reclamating those people, that's a whole very complex topic, which we might talk about today, because today happens to be polemic day. Then over there, we have people labeled as Maverick. Oh, well, then we're getting into the weeds, aren't we? But they do concept this a few times throughout the X series. And they actually touch on it here, but again, they don't do anything with it. At every step of the way, X and Zero, but mostly X, really seems eager to just label these people Mavericks. Well, you're doing this, and I don't understand you, so you're a Maverick. They could have really taken that concept and ran with it. The idea that X has become so jaded over the years that he's just labeling anyone a Maverick. So this is a concept of escalation when it comes to, I don't have a better way to put this, law enforcement, right? So, the way this tends to work, and this has been true for most of human history, is, everyone's cool, right? But then one person does something. And it's like, okay, well, now that's not allowed. So the overall level of uncool raises. So now all of this is cool. But then hang on, one person does something even more extreme. So we've got to escalate our level of response. And then one person does something even more extreme, and then it escalates, and so forth and so on. This is a terrible visual metaphor, but I hope you at least get the idea. The concept of the idea that X started off being super unwilling to fight or destroy Mavericks. And then we get to X8 where he's just, the moment he sees someone, he's just done. He's not dealing with it anymore. He's not taking the risk that that person is innocent, and instead is presuming guilty. That's a cool concept. And there could be a lot. That's why I mentioned the Templar mentality there. There's a lot that could be done with that kind of narrative focus, especially for someone who is a stated pacifist like X. And of course, this ties into where the Zero series was intended to go with what eventually became Copy X. Nothing's done with it. I know it's a common trend. And that's such a shame, because all three of these, well, two of these concepts at least have some interesting, fun things they could do with them. And I guess maybe you could make the third thing interesting. I don't know. But instead what we just have is a well voice acted, well presented, kind of boring story. But at least provides some things to think about. I've heard more people theory craft about X8 than any other X game, personally. Now, maybe that's just because of exposure. Maybe that's just because of anecdotal evidence. Maybe it's just because the fact that X8 was the last X game, so people have been speculating on it the longest, right? But one of the things I do like about this, that the game doesn't really earn, is the idea that Luminae and the new Reploids didn't actually go Maverick and didn't actually join Sigma. They were willing to go along with what Sigma was doing in Sigma's plan, but only because that happened to coincide with their plan. It wasn't even a choosing the devil versus thing, or choosing a lesser evil. It was literally just oh, well, you want this. Well, we also happen to want that. And Sigma's Sigma, so he could probably make at least some of this happen. Cool. So they just kind of affix themselves to his plan and just kind of maneuver their way through it. And this is when I want to bring up an idea that I've seen tossed around a lot. And it was actually mentioned on the stream, too. What if Luminae was wily? Now, hear me out for a moment. I do think this would take some rejiggering, because of course it would. But the idea of someone who is trying to destroy the old in favor of the new and trying to move forward, and someone who is using Sigma for his own ends and just kind of going along with it, while simultaneously championing the very idea of having true sentience and sapience by virtue of including within themselves the very virus that we've been talking so much about, therefore making them immune to it so they can't be hit by the zombie plague. And by virtue of choice deciding to go Maverick, by virtue of decision, by virtue of saying, no, screw it, we need to destroy the old world, becoming a, let's call it what it is, criminal. I don't know, there's several pieces of this that kind of make sense. But the more I think about it, the more I'm not sure I like that, because ultimately what he's talking about is just Albert's plan, isn't it? We evolution, we need to move forward, we need to go into this new concept and blah, 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 blah. And that's exactly what Albert was talking about back in ZX2. And I found myself thinking about that and wondering if that more fits with Dr. Vile's overall approach. And maybe this would be better if this was the precursor to Dr. Vile instead of Wily, and there's all sorts of ways we can take this. Oh, of course, I don't want to forget. Before I do forget, I do want to mention two things. First of all, I got to talk about Axel. I remembered. But second of all, favorite song. Jacob's Elevator is kind of tied for my favorite song. My other favorite song is one of the boss battles. And I say that weirdly because this game does something kind of cool, actually, where there's actually 3 or 4 different boss songs, depending. So one of those is really cool. It's the one that's kind of jazzy, if that makes any sense. But the other one is Jacob's Elevator. That's the one I can point to very clearly. What's your favorite? The other thing is Axel. The new type Reploid is the easiest one to play as. Think about it. He is by far one of the most overall versatile and capable of dealing with the situations, in addition to the fact that Axel is literally mandatory for getting most of those secret chips, because you have to copy. Oh yeah, they made the copy ability better by making it actually worth a bit of a damn here, because what it is, rather than the slow, terrible shot that does nothing, you can actually, do some decent damage with it and shoot it more rapidly. And then what you do is you just pick up their chip, and then you could just go into the menu and select it and switch to that like that and gain their abilities, which are useful for the level they're in. So, copy chip is better. Shoot while hovering, shoot in all directions, actual weapon variety. It's interesting to think about. I think that's all I've got. This has been a fascinating series to go through. I thought I'd do one last thing just while we're finishing here, because I've got the audit list. I'm going to pull this up so it's going to be a little bright here. There we go. I've got the audit list here. And this is the total score for each of these games. And I thought it'd be interesting to see how they lined up. For me, of course, obviously. I'm part of the reason I'm sharing this is I'm curious what your order is for the X games, if you happen to have such a thing, because several people were sharing that on stream as well. So for me, X1 is on the top. This is probably not a surprise. Of all the things, X1... I was talking to Pax about this just last night. X1... That's really bright. I wish there was a dark mode for that. X1 didn't do anything wrong. I mean, don't mistake me, it had flaws, but it didn't do anything that was a big issue that got in the way of its enjoyment. Most every other X game after that, definitively from X3 onwards, has at least one big issue with it that drags the game down. There's always at least one or one asterisk that drags the games down. And I bring that up because that's why X1 is on the top, because it doesn't have that problem. I think most of the X games would be much higher rated if not for those flaws. So anyways, X1 is on top. X2 is number 2. I will admit that surprised me. But upon replaying X2, it was really made clear to me how good of a game it is and how well designed and how well processed it is and blah, 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 blah. The number 3 slot is X5. If you watch the stream, that may sound weird, but that's because I actually literally miscounted one, and that's on me. I apologize. So X5 is number 3, barely, followed almost immediately by X4. X5 and X4 are so close to each other to effectively be tied. So that's a little bit of a defense of myself there. But I stand by that because, in my opinion, X5 did several things better, except X4 was overall a tighter experience. X5 had an improved story, mostly in presentation, whereas X4's story presentation was garbage. And so you can see how it kind of balances out. That's why they're effectively tied there. After that is X8. So X8 actually scored our 5th highest, which is kind of surprising. Still positive. Still a good score. It's still 25.39, which is very good. Then we start to plummet, because after that, we have X3, which was in the single-digit range. That's a drop of about 20 points. And then we get down to X6, which is negative 26. And then we get down to X7, which is negative 102, and currently the worst game I've ever reviewed. And I just want you to appreciate that for a moment. That's part of why I wanted to share that, not just to share the order, which of course I want to hear yours as well, but to share that the X series goes from a plus 65, which is one of the best games I've ever reviewed. I think that's like 11th best game ever that I've reviewed, to negative 102, which is the worst game I've ever reviewed. That is a gargantuan spread of quality. I'm absolutely gobsmacked by that. That is astonishing. And that's the X series in a nutshell, isn't it? I hope you've enjoyed this series. Starting Tuesday, we're going to go through the classics. That should be fun. I'm very curious how those are going to line up too. But until then, see you next time. And hey, the camera didn't die this time.